Hey, it's TDA and welcome to episode 16 of this perfect ratio run. Last time we built the green science and as you can see it is not really working as well as we wanted to. Now the key reason for that is hydrogen. As you can see we have quite a bit of hydrogen coming in, but we need way more. And there's pretty much two ways to do that. One way is through a method I will show you in the next episode. But for now we are going to be working on the most straightforward method, and that is our first step towards orbital collectors. Now, if you check the orbital collector base materials, you actually see two buildings in there. One of them is the ILS. Well, we've built that before, so that's pretty easy. But we also need accumulators, which is another building. And yes, this is a building you can actually place on the ground, etc. But that will be built without any charge, so we also need to charge it up. And in order to do that, we will need energy exchangers. So today we are going to be building both those items, the energy exchangers to charge up the accumulators, which we'll be using in the same build. Now this will be a 2-for-1 build, so basically it's going to be one build with two different items, because you will never want to build accumulators without energy exchangers. In theory you could, because you can use this as a type of battery, but don't do that, it's really not efficient. So if you're going to be building accumulators, you might as well use them to charge them up and discharge them, not just because you need them for the orbital collectors, but it's actually a pretty good way in the mid to late game to kind of start up your energy production on new planets, especially if you have a surplus of energy elsewhere. Now, I will show you how exactly to do that in the next episode, but let's first build these things, because otherwise it's going to be very hard to show you that. Now, energy exchangers, they need quite a few components. They need 4 different ones, none of them really complicated, but 4 is still a lot. So what we're going to do is we are going to be building some titanium alloy over here. And we are going to bring those up a few notches. Then we are also going to be building steel. So this is going to be the titanium alloy. And we are going to be building steel. Steel, where are you? There. Now we are also going to need processors. And those are going to come down there. And that will be processors. Where are you? There you are. And then last but not least, we are going to need some production of particle containers. And actually, those should be in here, in between here. So let me change that up, because I didn't leave enough room for that. And then we're going to need some of those over here, like so. And where's this? There we go. Okay, so steel, alloy. That reminds me of Horizon Zero Dawn, if you've played that game. Anyway. That was probably intentional that they did that, actually, the name. But I'm getting off topic. So let's build some stuff. We are going to need some production of particle containers, and we're going to put those over here. And we only need 2 of those. So that will be working out just fine. And of course we need a belt to actually get all the stuff there. Now, in order to build particle containers, we're going to need our favorite subject, which is turbines, and we are going to need 2 of those, and then we're going to need 3 belts in between, just making sure that there's a room for that, because I suck at counting sometimes. There we go. So just before I forget, this is going to be the turbines, and then we are going to need 3 more, and those are going to be over here, nicely aligned, and this is going to be the engines. There we go, 3 engines. Now, you've seen this build a few times before, I think, so we are also going to need some magnetic coils and some cogs over here. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, because I think you know the drill of especially this part of the build, because turbines are in every single build. Almost, anyway. Okay, so there are going to be some belts in between here, of course. So, that's actually one of the more interesting parts about this whole turbine part of the build, because I keep changing it up how I build it, depending on the amount of turbines and engines, etc. I need, because the ratios turn out slightly different every time, and I do want to kind of keep the whole build symmetric, so I keep shifting this around. So it's actually not exactly the same build every time around. there are small nuances, small changes in there to make sure all the belts can go where they need to go, etc. Things like that. The cogs are going to be down here. There we go. Now, let me see. What else do we need? We also need processors, remember? And processors we actually need quite a lot of. I am going to have to put in 2 belts over here. And this is actually going to be one of the nice parts about this build, is that we are going to have a belt full of steel over here, which has 2 functions. It goes into the engines and goes into the cogs. And then we have, it's actually going to be, yeah, just in those 2 things. And then we are going to be using the copper, which is not actually a part of this build, but copper is going to be part of the processors. And the processors are going to be over here. And so let me make sure I set the recipe. There we go. And processors need, of course, the component and the circuit boards. Now the circuit boards, only 2, and look at that. Nicely aligned with this. And only 2 of them. There we go. And they need, of course, also the iron as well as the copper. And then the copper is going to be used in another place, which is up there. The copper is going to be used here. Does this actually need copper? No, it doesn't. So why am I going to make this any more complicated than it needs to be? Let's do it like this. And then it is going to go up here. There. And it's going to go down here. In between these 2 buildings, that should fit if you are building this in the correct space on your planet. And once again, I'm using pretty much the optimal place, which is just at the side of the first fault line. Because that has kind of the optimal spacing between buildings. And then we're going to wrap it all the way around here. Because these also need copper ingots. And the particle containers also need copper. And that's also why we needed to put in this, because now you can connect it up with this belt. So copper, copper, and more copper being used in 3 different places just with 1 belt, and no spaghetti here. So awesome. Anyway, that leaves us with a few more belts to build. So we are going to be transporting the processors from over here, around here, and then up here. That should work quite well. And then the circuit boards are going to come out here, and they need to go into the processors, so they need to go all the way over here. And of course we also need the components, which we haven't built yet. And I will mark everything up so we don't forget what we're doing. So this is going to be the processors, this is going to be the circuit boards, and then we have the components on here. Components, where are you? There you are. It's hovering right over it. All right. So then what else do we need? Well, we need some processors, not processors, components, like I said. And we are going to need exactly 8 of those. And hey, look how nicely that aligns once again. And then those are going to be over here. There we go. And then we're going to do that like this. It doesn't really work that well from this side, so let's do it from this. And there we go. That of course does mean that we need 2 more things for that, and that is a belt of copper once again. And hey, look, we have copper incoming from over there. And then we need a belt for the silicon, because of course we need both silicon as well as copper for this. And this is going to be the copper, and this is going to be the silicon. Silicon, there we go. Now, there's a few ways to do this. But I like doing it in 2 different belts. So you could put a splitter in somewhere, but the problem with splitters always is that they take up a little bit more room than I want to use. And what I really like about this build is that we can really nicely align the smelters. So specifically, if we put the smelters for copper down here, and we're going to need 12 of those. There we go. Copper. then what we can actually do is we can have a belt on either side. And specifically this belt is going to be a little bit lower. And basically it's going to work like this. One belt goes down here. And then we have another belt producing the copper that is simply going to start all the way over there and do it like that. You can of course make one longer and one shorter. I actually just forgot the exact ratio between the two smelting requirements, and I'll figure that out in the break once I put up all the sorters and things like that. But this is the basic idea. Now we of course also need some copper ore to come in, and that will be on this belt. Now you can switch these around as well. I just like doing it like that. If you prefer it better looking the other way around, feel free to do so, of course. And then we have a belt full of iron over here. And strangely enough, we also need exactly 12 smelters for that. So that's going to be like this. And this is going to be iron. Now, doesn't this look nice and clean? I think it does. And that leaves the smelters for the silicon. Now we need to be a little bit careful about how we put those. And actually I did do this wrong. There we go, because this could go one more out and then down. And then it also always removes that memo. That's such a shame. Because if we do it like this, then that should leave room to do this. We are going to leave one out there, because otherwise we're overproducing, and this wouldn't be a perfect ratio run if we did it like that. And I really ran out of smelters. Oh, such bad preparation, TDA. Come on, come on. Where's my smelters? Here, have 400 smelters. There we go. That should cover it. And there we go. And this is 22, if I did my math correctly. And I'm an actuary, so you can always trust my math, right? Anyway, 22 silicon smelters, and if you do it like this, then you can do something I always really enjoy doing, which is this particular build where we kind of flip those around, hook those up, flip those around, hook those up. Then we bitch and moan a little bit about the T curve over there. Hopefully something that developers will fix in one of the future updates. They can do it in every other type of cross-section, so I'm not sure why this one looks so ugly. But let's not start that discussion once again. And then we have the smelters for the silicon over here. Now, of course, I will hook everything up to sorters, but we'll do that offline after we finish the rest of the build. Because what we also need is a couple of belts for the magnets. Magnets, and we actually don't need that many, luckily, because magnets are really slow to produce, so it always really annoys me when I have to build too many of those, because on some of the previous builds, as you have seen, they can get really extensive. And yeah, so let's see, what else do we need? We have the copper over here, so remember, this is the copper. And that means that we are going to do this like this, and you will see why in a moment. This is going to be the magnets. Okay. What else? Right, we need some smelting for graphite, which we are going to be putting over here. We leave a little empty space over there because it turns out we just need 4 of these, not 5. I was almost tempted to make it 5 because it looks even more symmetric, but once again we need to stick to our ratios, so we're not going to be overproducing it. And then we built in the belt like something like this, I think. We'll have to see. And you might be wondering, why are you building graphite? You haven't built anything yet that actually requires that. Well, no, not yet, but we'll get to that in a second. Because we need some ore over here. Actually, no, we don't want it over there. We want it in the middle, because that way it can feed into both this iron as well as the magnets over there. And this, of course, should also be iron. There we go. Okay, so Just marking it up. Iron ore. Iron. This is going to be a belt of copper, and then of course this will be a belt of copper ore, and then this is also going to be a belt of copper. This is going to be a belt of silicon, and then this is going to be the silicon ore, which I'm actually going to mark over here because we did that elsewhere as well. And then we are going to be marking the silicon over here as well. Nice and easy, and this is slightly misaligned, which is annoying me, so bear with me while I fix that. There we go. Okay. Now, what else? We need a couple of smelters, and we need a couple of chemical plants. Of course, no build will be complete without those bleeping chemical plants. I am actually going to have to measure this out in order to make sure everything is nicely aligned. So I'm just going to put it down here for a second. I might need to move that in a moment. But what I want to do is put a belt like this. And yeah, that should work. And why is there a belt like that? Well, this is going to be a belt which is going to feed into a few smelters over here. And doesn't really matter exactly where you put them, but I think this should be nicely aligned. Let's see. Does this align with the... Yeah, this looks nice. Okay. And this is going to be the titanium alloy. And you might be wondering, why are you spending so much time about figuring out where to place this? This is a very tight build. No, it's not. I just wanted to kind of be aligned with these buildings over here. The end of this being more or less aligned with the building, with the assembler over here. Just keeps things a little bit nice and tidy. Okay, so what else do we need now? Well, we need some alloy. Needs the acid, which is going to be on this belt. We also need some steel, and we need some titanium. And look, steel. We need steel over here as well. Now, the nice thing is what we can do is do this like this. And that means we have the alloy fixed. We also need some steel incoming, which we are going to do like this. And that leaves this room for a belt of titanium. And titanium we will be smelting over here, which we're going to need 6 smelters of. Not an exact ratio in terms of the alloy, but that's not really a problem. And then we are actually going to be bringing in the... something like this, I think. Going to be bringing in the ore over here. So... just marking it up once again. This is going to be the ore. This is going to be the ingots. Then we're going to have the acid over here, which it was already marked up. But once again, let's align the markings. And then we have the titanium alloy over here. Okay. Now, we're going to be putting in an ILS over here. And we are going to be putting that in something like this. Yeah, that should fit in quite nicely, I think. Yep. And that means that what we can do is put in a belt like this. Hello? Hello? What we can actually do, and yes, this is just me fine-tuning the build, but I think most of you will appreciate that, is do this like that. Shorten this one as well. And we'll take this out. And what we're trying to do here is this. Because what we can do now is put a belt next to this straight into the ILS. Was that really worth moving everything up one thing? Yes, it was. I think so. Anyway. That means that we have outgoing in the middle over here, which is also really nice and clean. And then we have that all fixed. Now, next part of the build. Chemical plants. Yes, chemical plants. We need more chemical plants. And we are going to need quite a few of those. We are going to need 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we might actually be able to space those out. So let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, I think this should work. And why am I spacing them out? Well, that will make it a little bit easier for you to place this blueprint wherever you want. Because once again, if anything really messes up your blueprints, it's going to be chemical plants most of the time. The way they get placed on the grid is just really awkward sometimes, and yeah, that messes it up. You've watched previous episodes, you'll have seen me complain about that quite a bit. Did we actually space that out now or not? I thought I did. Let me check. So we did. So then why? Okay, and this is exactly what I mean. So the spacing between these two rows is exactly the same, but as you can see, it is not. And that's because of the grid. Can you see the difference in these two grids? I can't, but apparently according to the game, there is a difference. So what I actually need to do is I need to simply space those out normally, I think. Yeah. And then they should be aligned. However, in this case, we only need 2. And there you see my struggle with chemical plants. And these are going to be the acid. We need quite a lot of that because we need the acid for quite a bit of production over here for the titanium alloy. And as you can see, it needs 8 per 12 seconds. So it's almost 1 per second per smelter. So this is quite heavy. And what we are going to be producing over here is our old favorite graphene. Now graphene also needs the acid, so that's why we put those on opposite sides of these belts, so we can feed that into both the graphene as well as the titanium alloy. And look, we already had our graphite production over here, so that is also sorted out. Now of course, now I did forget to put in a belt for the graphene to actually go anywhere, so I won't have you sit through me replacing everything by 1 square. So be right back. And with the power of blueprints, I shifted everything up with 1 square, connected the belts back up again, and now we have an outgoing belt for the graphene as well, which goes down here and will supply this production of particle containers. There we go. And as always, in a building built like this, the ratios are not going to be exactly perfect sometimes, but we are the base production will be as close to perfect as possible, which also means that every building after that might not always be fully operational, but it will be producing at exactly the ratio that everything else after that needs. And in the end, we are aiming at an exact 100% production of these, so 1 energy exchanger per 15 seconds. So again, this is a Mark III assembler, which can actually produce them a little bit faster than that, but you don't need that fast production, and it will only blow up your build in terms of the size of it. So I'm basing the base production of these buildings at the 100% speed, which also means that you could, in theory, replace this with a Mark II assembler and it should still be working optimal. But why would you? If you have Mark IIIs available anyway, you don't want to be carrying around 2 different types. At least I don't think so. Now, what else do we need? Well, we need all the base materials for this. So that means that we are going to have to be pulling in 3 belts worth of materials over here. That's 1. It's going to be the stone. Now we need the oil, and then we also need the water. And I always like putting that on the outside of the build because that makes it a little bit easier to not wrap that up in everything else that's going on down there. Now, what else do we need? We are actually close to done already, but if you have been paying attention, you might notice that I kind of have seemed to forgotten something, and I of course did not forget, don't worry, because we need another belt going over here, and then down here, and then down here, into here. Oh, actually, I was wondering about that. should be connecting that up with this, because not this is our build for the steel, but that is going to be on this belt. And this goes on this temporary belt, but this is going to go all the way through down there, because it also needs to go into the end production of the exchanger. And that means we need to get the steel from here somewhere. Now, where would you say? Well, we're actually going to be flipping it all the way around back here. Because we are getting to the second part of our build, and that is going to be the accumulators themselves. Now, the accumulators are going to require a few materials that we have already produced here, but I kind of keep it separate from everything else, because if you want to hook up all the smelters in one go and then spread them across your entire build, it gets really messy really fast. We don't want spaghetti, so we might as well just take advantage of the space that we have over here in this area. And what we're going to be doing is we are going to be putting in a belt like something like this over here. Just need to make sure I kind of space that out correctly. Something like this. We have some extra room here, by the way, so it doesn't need to be this perfect in terms of how you exactly position that. We also need a belt for the graphite, when we are going to need a belt for magnets once again, which is probably going to be somewhere around here. So this is going to be the belt for the crystal silicon, then we're going to have a belt for the graphite, and then we're going to have a belt for the magnets. Magnets, not these, magnets, the other round things. There we go. All right, and what are we going to be producing with that? Well, a few things. And let's see, how should we align that? Something like this, maybe? I think we can move out a little bit further than that, so let's do it like that. And what are we going to be producing here? Well, we are going to need a few things. Let me show you over here. We are going to need the supermagnetic rings. We are going to need the crystal silicon. We already put a belt for that. And we are going to need some very basic steel. Now, all of that is not going to be that complicated, but still, we need to make sure everything fits in there. And we are going to be doing that by having the... Where you are you? There you are. And we are going to have to put in the turbines for that, and then we are going to have to put in the engines. Now, once again, these ratios are not perfect. It doesn't need to be, because we're basing that on the final end product. And these need the magnets and the turbines. The turbines are right next to here, so that's going to be quite straightforward. We already have the other two items on the belts over there, so that's going to be easy as well. We are also going to be putting in a belt over here, from this side to this side. And that's going to be the engines, and the engines that we are going to be producing are going to be not that close, not that close. 1, 2, here we go. Out over here. This is going to be the engines. Why do I keep clicking on this thing today? There we go. Engines. And then we are going to be putting in those like that. And then, of course, once again, we need the same things over and over. Actually, we do need the magnetic coils over here. And then, of course, our last item are the cogs. Here we go. This is a mini turbine build, basically. And then we should be able to put those like this. The cogs over here like that. And that does mean that we need something over here, which is the copper. Now we already have the magnets over here, and this is one of the other nice things. We have the magnets here for the coils, and we have the magnets here for the supermagnetic rings. So they need to be on the same side of this little turbine build. For the same reasoning, we need the iron on the same side of the turbine build as well, because the cogs need them and the engines need them. So this is going to be the iron that I mentioned before. Now, we need smelters for all of that, of course. So luckily we just got 400 out of our stash. So we can probably... Let me see actually, because I want to align that with something over here. And what we're going to be building over here is this. This is going to be the accumulators themselves. There we go. And as you just saw, we need a few things for that. So we need the supermagnetic rings. Well, we have those on the belt over here. We need the crystal silicon as well, and we need the iron. Well, once again, the iron, very easy. We already have it on the belt here, so that's 3 uses for 1 belt of iron. Hey, isn't that perfect? I think so. And then we are going to be putting in those down there and those down there. So then we have the crystal silicon over here and the supermagnetic rings over here. Supermagnetic rings, where are you? There you are. And that covers all the base materials for that. Now, that also means that what we can do is put in an ILS over here. Doesn't matter exactly how we put it. I don't think so, but we might as well align it nicely with the rest of this. There we go. Because then, once again, what we can do is put a belt straight down the middle for the accumulators. And it also means that we have some room for these 3 belts. There we go. And that means we have 3 outputs, 1 input, which is 4 materials, and that leaves the 5th one for the warpers. So again, fully made use out of this ILS by putting it in the same build as everything else. So that's just a little bonus, I think, for this specific build. That's quite nice. Now, last but not least, well, not last, actually, we're not quite done yet. We need a lot of smelters. I just mentioned the smelters for the magnets. We are going to need 5 of those. And that leaves a 3rd one. And that is going to be the crystal silicon. There we go. Those are those. And this is going to be the crystal silicon. And then, in order to make that, of course, we also need silicon itself. And that's going to be a direct input. It's just a 1-to-1 ratio, so no need for belts over there. And that means we have to make some graphite as well, which is going to be over here. Close enough with the belts, just not entirely perfect just yet. Now, that also means, of course, that we are going to have to supply this with some raw ore. We'll fix that in a second. But what we're also going to need is a few smelters for iron as well as copper. And what we're going to do is we are going to keep this belt nice and straight. And then we are going to align that with everything else. We are going to need 6 smelters making iron. There we go. And then we are going to need 2 making copper. Just 2. Nice and easy. No need to overproduce this. There we go. This belt is going to be the iron, and that leaves this side to make the copper. And then we're going to be putting in that like this. There we go. That also means that what we can actually do is use this belt to, this belt to supply the iron, which once again will be serving both these smelters as well as these smelters. So this is going to be the iron ore. This is going to go into that, into that. This is going to be the copper, and this was already, might as well just mark it up once again, the iron. Now, that also means that we are going to need some inputs for silicon, and we are going to need some inputs for the this actually needs to go down here somewhere, because we do need to place an ILS in here somewhere in order to actually get those ores everywhere that we want them to go. Let's swap those around actually. So let's do it like this. This is going to be a belt for the silicon, and then we are going to be putting in a belt for copper over here. we might actually want to slightly adjust these. So I'll leave the markings off there for a moment because we need to align that with the ILS. And of course, what we also need is a belt here for the copper ore. Now, almost done with all the smelters, but we are going to need only 2 more types of smelters, but we're going to need a lot of them, because in order to make all of this steel, we are going to need 2 and then a few more. So this is 8 in total. Now these are going to be iron. Well, let's do this from the other direction. That works a little bit more convenient. There we go. This is going to be steel. And then we don't need just 8 of those. No, we need 16 of those. So what we're going to do is, apparently they were already set to the correct distance. I just copied the steel, didn't I? Yes, I did, of course. There we go. Actually, we might as well... No, doesn't really matter. There we go. And steel. Now what we can do is do the following. We are going to be putting in a belt with ore in the middle, similar to what we've done before, I think, a few times. And then this is going to be an outgoing belt that is going to go all the way around. Like this. Into there. Just go, no, you're just going to remove this part of the belt. I like to keep it as tidy as possible. And similarly, we are going to need a second belt for the other half of the steel. Now, that leaves an ILS, and let's see where we are going to be putting that, because we do want to kind of make sure we align this properly so that we don't run out of space. I think somewhere here nicely put in the middle should do. Maybe here, maybe here, maybe here, maybe here. Does it really matter? Probably not. Why can't I put it like that? Oh, there's a little belt in the way. Hello. There we go. And then we should be able to place it like this. Maybe 1 up, actually. There we go. Why 1 up? Well, that will allow us to do this. Like this. And we can also... Ah, this is a shame. Can we move it up 1 more? Okay, now I might just have to move everything up with 1 piece because... Yeah, let me do that and I'll show you in a second why. Okay, be right back. And we're back, and I didn't just move up everything by 1 space, I actually had to move it up with 2 spaces because, first of all, this little thing, because what we don't want to do is have this feed in like that, because then we won't have any place to connect the sorter. No, we want to make sure it goes something like this. And then this place can be used to fit in the sorter. Now, we actually need to kind of move this as well, because we will need the additional space for something else. And that's going to be obvious in a second, but let me do it like this first. This is 1 belt, that's 2 belts, because we actually need quite a few belts on this side as well. We are going to be needing a belt for iron ore, and we need a second belt for coal. This is going to be the coal. There we go. So that is 2 belts over here. And then what we also need is a belt for the coal over here. We can do that something like this, maybe. Actually, not like that. Hold on. Do you see this little thingy in the belt? Again, that's the grid shifting. Nothing we can really do about that, but it does really annoy me. And there we go. We are going to need a belt of iron over here. We are going to need a belt of coal, just 1, so might as well do it like that. And then finally, we are going to need a belt with silicon. So this is going to be that. This is going to be not that. Cool. And then we're going to be using the silicon over here. And that is almost wrapping up our build because we need one more belt. No, actually 3 more belts. Almost forgot about these down here. There we go. That's a belt with copper. That's a belt with silicon. And then here, last but not least, we have another belt of ore. Now remember, this is going to be the steel. I actually didn't mark this up yet. And this is also going to be steel. Which means that we have an input for iron ore over there and input for iron ore over there. There we go. And yeah, that wraps everything up. And you might be wondering, this is a lot of belts from one ILS. Is this all going to work out? Yes, it is, because we need coal, that's 1, iron, that's 2, copper, that's 3, and silicon, that's 4. More iron, we already had that. And more iron, we already had that. More copper, this is actually going to be copper. But we already had that, and coal and silicon as well, and we already had that. So this is actually only 4 resources just spread around the entire build from one single ILS placed strategically in the middle to avoid any spaghetti. We have a little octopus over here. Not entirely sure if the math on the arms turns out with an octopus. Don't think it does, but just go with me for now. And yeah, that wraps up this build almost. We of course need to hook everything up and actually check it works. So be right back while I do that. And we're back and we're done. As you can see, the whole factory is nicely plugging away. We are now producing some exchangers, power exchangers. We are also producing all the way over here the accumulators. Let's see how many we have by now. Only 27, but it just started, and as you can see, we have all the materials coming in, and that will sort it out quite quickly. So plenty of accumulators that we have to use for our next few builds. And remember, you don't need to overproduce this. So once again, I actually set it to 1000 now. That's probably overkill. But if you use the accumulators for the orbital collectors, you're only going to need a small amount per gas giant, because there's a limited amount, exactly 40 to be precise, of orbital collectors that you can put on a gas giant. And of course, there's only so many gas giants in the game. And if you use them for the power supply thing that I mentioned at the start of the episode, then as soon as the accumulator is empty again after you've used it, you discharge it on the planet where you want to use the energy. You can simply recharge it. So assuming you have enough to keep your base powered up, and enough to also allow for the time it takes to travel back and recharge, etc, etc. There's only so many you need, so you don't need 10,000 of these. You do need quite a lot if you are starting to use it for that purpose, but this will continuously be producing, and of course every single accumulator that's taken out of this facility will never get back in, so you're always producing more and more accumulators as you actually need them. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you do, please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. About 1/3 of you is not subscribed. Of course, that's completely up to you if you want to do so or not, but it doesn't cost you anything and it does help me out. The bigger the channel becomes, the more options we get. For example, if we hit 500, which we are looking to do pretty soon, that will allow me to start using the community tab, which I don't have access to right now because I don't have 500 subscribers. And it will be a fun new way to interact with each other. So yeah, consider subscribing if you haven't. And even if you don't, I hope to see you in the next one, where we will be using a few new tricks to actually put these buildings to use. I'll show you a few other ways you can easily get a lot of hydrogen, especially if you need more than your gas giants can supply you with, and you will need a lot of hydrogen for the endgame builds. So don't forget to tune in for that one. For now, have a nice one.